Have you ever stepped into a moment that felt completely ordinary, and yet sensed that something quiet was unfolding beneath the surface? No one said anything. Not a single word was spoken. It was just a very thin feeling, like a soft breeze passing by, gentle, but enough to slow you down for a breath. For Libra, moments like this aren't unfamiliar. You often notice a shift before it ever takes a clear shape, not through logic, but through a subtle awareness, something deeply personal, almost whisper quiet. And sometimes it's those unspoken emotions that end up teaching us the most, about sensitivity, about boundaries, about how to keep the heart in balance. If you find yourself in a season like this, let's slow the pace together and begin with the moment where no words are spoken. In life, not everything that matters arrives with an explanation. Some moments come in quietly, without warning, without needing anyone to confirm them. They feel like a pause between two breaths, a glance that meets, then drifts away, a stretch of silence that lingers a little longer than usual, yet no one rushes to fill it. And if you pay close attention, you begin to notice something else. It's often in these empty spaces that emotion truly starts to take shape. Libra tends to sense this early, not because you're searching for it, but because you naturally listen to what isn't being said. While others focus on the words, you notice the tone. When people hear the message, you feel the nuance underneath. That awareness isn't always clear. It doesn't come with a solid form. There's no precise name for it. It's just a very thin feeling. Very subtle, as if something brushed past you, leaving a quiet echo behind. You may have wondered at times whether you're simply too sensitive, whether you're reading too much into a moment that seems ordinary. But then you realize something important. That feeling doesn't frighten you. It doesn't throw you off balance. It simply causes you to pause. And that pause is very different from hesitation. It feels more like instinct, a gentle inner signal saying, "Hold on, there's something here worth listening to." Libra doesn't always speak what's felt, not because you're hiding it, but because you understand that not everything needs to be turned into words right away. Sometimes silence isn't emptiness, it's space. Space for emotion to exist without being defined. Space where no decision is required. In a world accustomed to quick reactions, choosing to slow down, choosing to observe, choosing not to label every feeling is a deeply conscious act. You're not trying to read people. You're not trying to predict what comes next. You're simply acknowledging that a small vibration has just moved through you. And perhaps that's how Libra maintains balance, not by controlling everything, but by allowing things to exist exactly as they are. A moment where no words are spoken doesn't ask you to act. It doesn't demand an answer. It simply invites you to be present. Present with that faint sensation. Present with yourself. And to trust that sometimes, pausing at the right moment is a very deep form of understanding. And from that moment, a quiet inner journey begins. Not loudly, not in a rush, but deep enough to carry you farther than you might expect. Libra is naturally familiar with weighing things carefully. Before trusting any feeling, you tend to return to reason first. Not to dismiss what you sense, but to see whether it can truly stand on its own. Questions surface quickly in your mind. Am I reading too much into this? Is this just a temporary emotional response? Will it pass like so many moments have passed before? Libra's mind works like a finely tuned scale. Each side holds a possibility. Each one is placed there with care. No side is allowed to outweigh the other too soon. Meanwhile, intuition doesn't argue. It doesn't ask for proof. It doesn't try to convince. It simply whispers, quietly, steadily, like an undercurrent moving beneath calm water. Often, intuition doesn't arrive with answers. It carries only a feeling that this deserves attention. No clear reason, no detailed explanation. Just a signal that is delicate yet enduring. Libra rarely reacts right away to signals like this. You let them remain, you watch. You notice whether they return. Like listening to a melody from far away, not clear enough to recognize the song, but familiar enough to know you've heard it before. This is where Libra's subtlety lives. You don't let intuition take control, but you don't push it aside either. You give it time. Time for reason to do its work. Time for sensation to settle. Time for things to reveal their own rhythm. And in that waiting space, you learn something essential. What truly matters rarely needs to speak loudly. It doesn't fight for attention. It doesn't demand immediate action. It simply exists, steady, and we like a background pulse. When you stop forcing conclusions, intuition becomes clearer in a natural way. Not loudly, not suddenly, but like morning light slowly filling a room until you realize it's been bright for a while now. Libra doesn't have to choose between logic and intuition. They aren't opposites. They simply speak different languages. Reason helps you stay grounded. Intuition helps you sense direction. When both are heard in balance, you're not swept away by emotion, and you don't lose the softness of your heart. And perhaps that's why what arrives so gently often stays the longest. Not to provoke a reaction, not to force change, just enough to invite you to listen more deeply to yourself before moving on to the next part of your inner journey. After reason and intuition are both present, a Libra begins to notice something more subtle. Not every inner movement needs an explanation. Not every silence carries a message waiting to be unlocked. In a world used to assigning meaning to everything, not rushing to name a feeling can feel surprisingly difficult. People often ask, what does this mean? How am I supposed to understand this? But for Libra, emotional maturity isn't found in understanding everything. It lives in the ability to let what isn't clear exist without turning it into a burden on the mind. Some emotions aren't born to guide you. They don't point the way. They don't ask for a decision. They simply arrive, quietly, and remain for a while. Like a thin cloud drifting across the evening sky. Not a sign of rain, not something that blocks the light, just a gentle movement, enough to let you know the sky is shifting. Libra slowly understands that when you analyze things too early, you risk losing the softness of the moment. Emotion stops being an experience and turns into a problem to solve. And not every problem belongs on the scale. Libra's calm doesn't come from control. It comes from not forcing feelings to speak before they're ready. You allow yourself to feel without needing to react. You allow yourself to notice without needing to conclude. That isn't indifference. It's respect for your inner life. Some things remain unspoken not because of fear, but because the timing hasn't arrived. And some emotions never need to be brought into the light because they're meant to live in the private spaces of the heart. Libra learns not to turn every inner movement into a story. You let them pass through you, the way background music fills a quiet room. No need to focus on every note. No need to memorize the melody, just letting it be there. In that permission, you maintain a balance that is uniquely yours. You don't push feelings away, but you don't grip them tightly either. You stand in the middle, where everything can breathe. There's a kind of growth that can't be measured by decisions or actions. It's the ability to stay with uncertainty without feeling uneasy. The ability to accept that you don't always need to know exactly what you're feeling. Libra no longer sees the unclear as a flaw. You begin to recognize it as a natural part of living, a part that allows you to soften, a part that frees you from having to be certain all the time. And when you stop trying to decode every emotion, something else happens naturally. You feel lighter, less guarded, less tense about what's unfolding inside you. You don't need to rush forward. You don't need to turn back. You only need to stand steady in the present and trust that whatever needs to be understood will find its voice at the right moment. Remaining calm in the face of uncertainty doesn't make you weaker. It makes you deeper. And for Libra, this isn't just an emotional skill. It's a way of living. One where you don't lose yourself simply because you wanted answers too soon. Libra is born with a clear sensitivity to other people. No long explanations are needed. No story has to be fully told. A subtle shift in someone's eyes, a pause in their breathing that lasts just a little longer than usual, and you already sense that something is unfolding inside them. That empathy isn't a learned skill. It's instinctive. A way you connect with the world by stepping into another person's emotional space without crossing any physical boundary. But this is also where Libra begins to learn a difficult lesson. That feeling deeply doesn't mean you're meant to carry everything. There may have been times when understanding blurred into responsibility. You sensed someone else's sadness and felt the urge to do something. You noticed someone's silence and instinctively tried to fill it. Not because you wanted control, but because you didn't want anyone to be alone with their emotions. Over time, though, something important becomes clear. Feeling doesn't mean taking on. Understanding doesn't require a response. Some emotions belong to other people. You may be able to touch them, but you're not meant to bring them home. A Libra begins to understand that boundaries are not distance. Boundaries are respect for others and for yourself. You don't have to become shelter for every emotional storm. You don't have to solve what was never placed in your hands. Listening is enough. Being present is enough. And sometimes not responding right away isn't coldness. It's a way of keeping the space safe. Libra learns to recognize the moment to pause, not because you don't care, but because you know that if you keep stepping forward, you may lose your own balance. There's a very thin line between empathy and losing yourself. It isn't clearly marked. There are no signs. Only an inner signal, when exhaustion appears without a clear reason. And when you begin listening to that feeling, you know it's time to take one step back. Stepping back isn't walking away. It's standing in the right place. Libra doesn't stop loving when boundaries are set. You're simply loving in a more mature way. You understand that you can't be everything to everyone, and you don't need to be. Gentle boundaries are how you protect the sensitivity that is your strength. They allow you to remain compassionate without being drained. They allow you to be present without disappearing. You allow others to walk their own paths, and you allow yourself not to carry those journeys. Within that healthy separation, connection doesn't disappear. It becomes clearer, lighter, less pressured, less weighted by expectation. Libra begins to realize that when you stand firmly within your boundaries, empathy becomes a gift, not a burden. You don't lose your softness. You simply learn where it belongs. And from there, you maintain balance not by doing more, but by knowing when to stop. There is a kind of calm that doesn't come from understanding everything. It appears when you stop demanding answers for every passing feeling, when you accept that not every experience needs to be named right away. Libra begins to notice this in the most ordinary moments, when a feeling passes through without a clear reason, when a thought appears, then fades, leaving behind a sense of ambiguity that isn't uncomfortable at all. Instead of searching for meaning, you let it stay. You don't push it away. You don't hold on to it. You simply acknowledge that you've just brushed against something very light. That permission creates a completely different kind of peace. Not the peace that comes when everything is resolved. But the peace that comes when you stop resisting what's happening inside you. Libra continues with everyday life. Familiar routines, repeated rhythms. You don't pause the world just because a feeling hasn't taken shape yet. You move through your day with fuller presence. You taste a meal completely. You listen to a song all the way through. You finish your work without letting your mind drift too far. That feeling still exists, but it isn't driving. It sits in the back seat, quietly observing. And for the first time in a long while, you don't feel the need to stay in control. There's a very subtle freedom in that moment. Freedom from forcing interpretation. Freedom in allowing uncertainty to be part of the human experience. Libra begins to understand that not naming everything isn't avoidance, it's a conscious choice. A way to protect inner balance from the pressure to figure it all out. When you stop rushing, something interesting happens. What needs clarity begins to reveal itself, not through analysis, but through the ripening of time, like morning light slowly filling the sky without anyone turning on a switch. You don't notice the exact moment it changes. Only later do you realize the light has been there for quite some time. Libra learns to trust this natural rhythm, to trust that not every answer needs to be pulled from the dark. Some things are meant to be waited for, so that when they arrive, you're quiet enough to receive them. In that slowness, you don't lose direction. Instead, you become more grounded, because you're no longer chasing certainty. You allow yourself to live in the present, not pulled forward by predictions, and not held back by what hasn't happened. Perhaps this is a very distinct kind of maturity for Libra, not loud, not performative, but deep enough to change the way you move through everyday life. You don't need to know everything to feel safe. You only need to know that you're in the right place, with your own breath, with a calm that doesn't need to be proven. And sometimes, because you don't push, don't label, don't force understanding, everything reveals itself in the gentlest way, not as an answer, but as a quiet realization. If right now, there's a very thin feeling inside you, unclear, not quite big enough to name, allow it to remain just as it is. There's nothing you need to do, nothing you need to understand, nothing you need to react to. Just stay there with yourself. Some moments in life don't ask for action. They don't come to push you forward or to point the way. They arrive as a quiet reminder that you're alive, that you're feeling, that you're present. And for Libra, the ability to stay with moments like this is a form of deep emotional wisdom. You don't need to rush into a new chapter. You don't need to make a decision. You don't need to carry anything extra on your shoulders. This stillness isn't delay. It's a necessary pause, a pause that allows the mind to settle and gives the heart enough room to open in its own natural way. Libra isn't here to solve every emotion. You don't need to play the role of understanding everything that's happening. Your role is more subtle than that. You create space for others to be who they are, space for feelings to exist without judgment, and most importantly, a space where you don't have to tense yourself against any expectation. When you allow everything to breathe, you also give yourself a chance to become lighter. Lighter in your thoughts, lighter in your reactions, lighter in the way you move through life. There may have been times when you thought you needed to do more, give more, be the steady ground for everyone. But eventually, you realize something quietly powerful. Calm presence at times is the greatest gift of all. No advice required, no guidance needed, just being fully there. Libra carries the ability to create peace not through grand gestures, but through inner balance. When you're steady, the space around you softens. When you're not pulled into the past or pushed toward the future, the present becomes complete in its own unique way. You don't need to become anyone else. You don't need to prove your depth. All that's needed is honesty with your inner rhythm. If an unspoken feeling is still there, let it stay as long as it needs. No forcing, no pushing away. Because some things, when placed in safety, naturally find their own shape. And some things once felt have already fulfilled their purpose. Libra doesn't need to move fast. You don't need to be ahead. You only need to move at your own pace. In a world that constantly urges forward motion, choosing to pause, choosing to listen, choosing to keep your inner world undisturbed is an act of quiet courage. And if there's one gentle message for you right now, it's this. You're doing enough. You're showing up in the right way. Keep your heart in balance, not for anyone else, but because you deserve that sense of peace. And in the quiet space you create, and every emotion, spoken or unspoken, has room to breathe. And here, this small story slowly comes to a close, not with a conclusion, but with a pause. If, while listening, you recognized yourself somewhere within these feelings, take it as a gentle greeting from your own inner world. No response needed, no changes required right now. Just carry that calm back into everyday life. Let your breath become steadier. Let your heart stay wide enough that there's no need to rush. Libra doesn't need to do more to become whole. You only need to keep showing up in the gentle, balanced way that has always been yours. Thank you for staying until the very end. I'll meet you again in another quiet moment of listening when you're ready.